Are you tired of blowing out your back at the bathtub while washing your dog or subjecting your canine to a water torture bath while leashed up to a post outside? Now there's a far more effective way to wash your pet while saving your back and keeping your dog happy. It's called Booster Bath, a portable bathtub on legs. Head over to boosterbath.com, one word, and pick one up. Available in 3 sizes, this tub system features a drain, a soap cubby, and water-controlling wand. This tub conveniently breaks down to be stored when not in use. Want to save 10% on your first-time purchase? Head over and sign up today to make that happen. Boosterbath.com. Welcome back to the Hard Parking Podcast, brought to you by Right Honda out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there and the mothers pulling double duty. So this is a special episode. It's a special episode for a couple reasons. This is my first Father's Day without my father. He passed last October, and I know that millions of people are experiencing this for the first time. And so I hope everyone can kind of carry forward thoughts that they've had and good thoughts. Not everybody's had a father, but I feel like most people hopefully have had someone in their life that they would at least consider a father figure, whether it's an uncle, maybe an older brother, maybe a grandfather, maybe a grandmother, maybe your mother, like I said, pulling double duty. Maybe your aunt, was a little more on the fatherly side. And then the other thing is it's kind of an anniversary for me in this show because a lot of my listeners and some of my friends now that I connected with through this awesome podcast community, the first episode they ever listened to was the Father's Day episode. And I was able to connect with them in a way where life is relatable, no matter what you're into. Sure, this is the non-automotive podcast, so it leans on the automotive side, but it's meant to be relatable because we all drive a car, most of us, but we all go through similar things in life. And it's my opportunity to share it with you, the listeners, and it's your opportunity to give me feedback. So if this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. And for all the return listeners, the new Patreons, thank you so much for your continued support. Again, share this show with a friend. That's really the only way that we can grow. Sure, I can throw out ads here and there, and I do, but if you like the show, tell somebody else, hey, you should check out the Hard Parking Podcast. Coming up on today's show, I have a phone conversation with a very good friend of mine, James Holloway. James and I have known each other for years. He was my roommate, he was my coworker. In fact, his mother was my manager, so we worked in a call center. I was 19, 20 years old back then. I'm 45 now, and so we've kind of kept in contact over the years. And, we have kind of similar parenting styles, I believe, and we have similar stories. We grew up in the 80s and 90s, or those are the days where the father wasn't around as much because he was out traveling, working, and mother stayed home and provided, and it did some of the house things and did the disciplinary stuff. And, we have a Q&A segment coming up, and I asked you guys to submit questions specific to Father's Day, if you could. And I have a handful of those to read. I don't read every single question submitted, but I try to read the ones I think are best, given the subject matter of the show. And sometimes they're just random. So if you ask me paper or plastic, I'm probably going to answer that. I'm probably going to answer that question. If you want to submit a question, you can email at hardparkingpodcast@gmail.com. Most of these questions come from Instagram, NA2NSX, or the Facebook page for Hard Parking Podcast, the Facebook group, Hard Parking Violations. So I urge you guys, if you listen to this, go join that page. That's where I drop all the information. I drop all the new episodes. I ask the listeners, those who join that page, for your feedback and answer some questions. And it's not just, podcast related stuff. We have a lot of fun. I wanted to reflect on some of the things with my father because there's things I'm going to talk about in the Q&A segment, but I'm kind of conflicted. I said before, in the episode, when just after my father passed, I literally recorded a day after my father died because I felt like I needed to. I needed to move on. I didn't need to stop my life. I needed to carry forward, and because that's what he would have wanted. But, there's things that he's instilled in me that I try to instill in others, and there's memories. One of the questions that, is about, for instance, people always ask me, my own children, my son always would ask me, how do you know so much about computers? And the answer I would have to say is my father. We never had a gaming console. I mean, sure, we had an Atari, but, once Atari phased out, when it became old technology, I never had a Nintendo. I never had a PlayStation. Never had a TurboGrafx 16. That's going to make some of you say, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Never had a Neo Geo. We always had a Commodore 64, and I used to get so mad because all my friends had all the cool games, and nobody wanted to come over and play computer games. Who wants to come over and play Commodore games when you have a Nintendo at home? But I learned a little bit. Now, you don't build Commodores. You have this fat monitor, and then you have this separate box. It's not even like a computer tower wasn't even a thing, at least not in my house. It's just kind of like this big, I don't know, scanner looking thing, a flatbed looking thing, and you just put a 5.5-inch floppy in it or a 3-inch floppy. Or there's a cassette slot on the back of the keyboard because the keyboard was fat. So they make cartridge games too. I think just being used to doing that, and then as I started getting older, learning about building computers, and I just built computers, and I used to always call and ask my father because he did computers. He did computers for the government. So I used to call and ask him for his help all the time. And, through multiple phone calls in my teenage years and even really in my 20s, he was just always there as like my personal tech support. And he had some old antiquated ways. And as the years went by, he started asking me about the computers and the components. But it's one of those things, right? So he was still playing with old shit. And I was always trying to progress and go newer. And so he would call me and ask me about his setup. And I'm like, Dad, you're rolling with a slow processor. You're rolling with an old iOS. Well, I don't like the new iOS. Windows 7 is blah, 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 or Windows whatever. And I was like, Dad, I don't really know what to tell you on that. I can't help you. You really need to upgrade this. Your computer's running too slow because you don't have enough RAM and the processor and blah, 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 blah. But that's kind of one of those things that with him passing, I think about those things and it's like, that's okay. It's okay because now I can provide those things to my kids. And I drive them crazy sometimes because I just can't give a straight answer. I have to kind of explain my answer and nobody wants that. They just want the answer. Yes or no? Again, paper or plastic? What's 2 plus 2? Well, what happens is if you take 2 to the left and you take 2 to the right and you put them together, now you have 4. No, they don't want to hear that. They just want to hear 2 plus 2 is 4. But, so I blame my father for that in a way. But it challenges you. Coming up, James Holloway. James Holloway. Welcome to the Hard Rocking Podcast, man. Long time. We've been friends for 25, 26 years.
Yeah, man, that sounds about right. You have our relationship has been longer than my marriage. So yes, it's been 25 years.
Same. Let's talk about your father. Let's talk about Father's Day. Like, what does Father's Day mean to you?
I consider it just that day, and this is over now. My oldest is 26. Or she'll be 26 this year. She'll actually, in about a week and a half. That it's changed over the years. Initially I felt Father's Day was that day where we all see on TV where the dad gets the ugly tie and, barbecuing in the backyard, the Cosby Show-esque, Father's Day. And then over time I realized that, you would hope that it becomes the day where your kids actually tell you they appreciate you as a father, stepfather, whatever title you want to put in front of it, but that they actually show you or tell you in some way. It's like, hey, man, you're doing a good job in a way, like an attaboy. Good job, Dad. You did the best you could, or you're doing the best you can, or, all that stuff. So to me now, it just feels like that I would hope, and, in time, everyone's children gets to a point where they realize that their parents sacrificed. They gave them everything they could, good, bad, and in between. They were the best parents you would think they could be. So, yeah, it's changed from that ugly fish tie when my kids were 6 to now that they're older, my youngest is 20, that they actually show, on that day, it's like, hey, man, this day is for you. We decided to do this thing to just show you we appreciate the fact that we have a father, number one, and number two, that, you did a good job, or at least we didn't fire you, if that's possible. So that's that time.
Jordan is 20.
Yeah, man, it's a weird deal when
Wow.
No. I still struggle with the fact that, and I'm sure you do too. You've been in their lives for so long that it's like it gets to a point where I don't want to say like I blacked out for a decade, but it really does feel like that. At one point, he was this 9-year-old asking me, "Can we sit down and eat ice cream and watch, I don't know, the Transformers movie, and I mean the original movie, not these horrible live action movies, together. And
You're talking about the
the
1985.
1985 version, 'cause I have it on DVD. And
Guess what?
what?
I have it too.
So,
Stan Bush, you got the touch.
oh, you got the touch. So,
And also Dare, right? I mean,
Yeah.
those are part of my gym. Like, those are my hype songs, and it's synth poppy and it sounds so dorky, but man, those songs hype you up, man.
well, you know what it is, and I tell people this, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm a musician or I truly can dive into this like someone who's, that's their craft, but there's something about that 80s synthesized music. That's what I think gets you amped up. I compare it to almost like now where these kids, these hooks are really just two steps hooks and a bass line and, some snare. But back then, I really think it was a synthesized pop sound that basically like, yeah, I know that sounds silly, but that movie.
It doesn't sound silly. And I know we're kind of going off of it, and that's fine. That's why I have you on the phone. But here's the thing. It's like the Weeknd song. For the real popular Weeknd song.
Yeah.
It's very synth poppy. It almost sounds like something from an anime.
It really does. And you make a great point. I think some of that does come from the fact that you and I both have this certain, feeling about anime that I think it does carry from that. And I think it's a mix of a couple of things. One is that music of the time in the 80s was very much tied into videos. And from videos, it moved into like, to me, cartoons, anime, where it's like they mesh really well. And I felt like, that's the kind of stuff that would amp you up. So back to the question, though, it's like, it's memories, it's all that good stuff. And the fact that I have a 20-year-old now who we went from sitting down and doing that to he comes home and, I'm like, hey, man, how was your day? And he sounds like me. When dude, it was a day at work, man. This and coworker Bob, blah 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 blah. And he's legitimately like, it's so weird to see your child as an adult. He's sitting in the kitchen like that decompress. When you got to decompress when you get home from work, whatever, 10, 15 minutes in the car, 5 minutes in the kitchen. Where he's drinking a root beer and he's like to him that's his beer after work. He's sitting there leaned up against the counter. Oh man. These people, man, work, man. And then he does his thing, and then it's like he goes and gets dressed and goes out, takes a shower, gets dressed, hangs out with his girlfriend and friends. And I'm like, it's so weird to me.
It's interesting how it's all perspective driven. What's a stressful day? I remember Marcelo would come in and he's, I'm so tired. I worked for 6 hours doing this, and God, there's got to be a better way. And you're kind of looking at him like, man, you haven't worked yet. But you know what? To his credit, man, he's kind of reinvented what work actually is. So what's one of the, I'm going to put you on the spot here, man.
All right.
Do you listen to my podcast?
I do. And I will say this, I'm not.
Don't fucking lie to me.
No. I'm not an avid listener. I catch episodes here and there because the weird thing about it is that, and I'm going to be blatantly honest. You know me. You've known me long enough to know. One, I'm highly ADD. Two, Facebook reminds me that when your podcasts are coming up, because I don't have like this scheduling system that goes, that's right, Jay's podcast is out and I should listen to the most recent episode. And so no, I haven't listened in a while because quite frankly, I don't really take care of my time appropriately. I'm really awful with time management, which no one is going to disagree with that. So.
Yeah, I'm not good either. No, it's all good. It's one of those things that I tell people is like, look, man, it's not personal, right? I mean, when someone says, hey, how's the podcast going? It's like, well, you want to say, well, how about you listen to the podcast? And then you would know.
True.
But then I had one person say, oh, I've never listened to it. I haven't listened to one single word of it. And I'm kind of looking at the guy like, okay, I don't know what to say to that. But I mean, even my favorite podcasts out there, whether it's PTI or Dan Le Batard Show with Stu Gatz and some of the Adam Carolla ones, like those are ones I've been listening to for years, and I still miss days, sometimes just large clusters of podcasts at a time. So not a big deal.
No, you make a good point.
Just wondering.
And I say it because, like I said earlier, I'm not huge, but I'm starting to become a podcast guy. And for a while, I only listened to two. One was Stretch and Bobbito, which old guys who had radio show in the 80s, and it's really hip hop driven. I like the fact they're like hip hop historians. But the problem is that, and I'm not gonna I won't name where the podcast was or whatever, but it had gotten to a point where it's like the shows became maybe next Tuesday question mark. And,
Right.
and then I was like, okay. And then, a week goes by and it's like, and then they'll pop up an episode 3 weeks later, or I listen to another one where it's every 2 weeks. But, I may be doing something that day and then I go, well, I follow the podcast on like Pandora or iHeartRadio or whatever. And again, I'm horrible at time management. I have it, I want to listen to it, and then some way, somehow I get distracted by, the pretty bird outside my window. And I don't listen till like a month later. So.
No, that's good. And the reason why I was asking is because I have a segment. I don't know if you've ever heard it because it's not on every single episode, but it's called the Q&A segment. So basically I ask people in the Facebook group, Hard Parking Violations, or I ask people on Instagram, submit a question. And so this week I said, hey guys, submit questions. It's Father's Day. Do you have any Father's Day style questions or just a random question? But instead of asking you some of those questions, because we could talk about those forever, because I was going to ask you, what's your favorite memory from childhood of your father? But instead I want to ask you, what was life like growing up with your father? What was your typical home structure?
I mean, I don't know if we've ever delved into my relationships, with my father and my mother. I mean, my mother, and your listeners may not know that, but I mean, you knew my mother because we all worked together, so we had a professional relationship, and a lot of people didn't have that information. But my dad was one of these guys who, I want to call him like. And I'm using television again as a reference, but my dad was one of those fathers who was basically the provider, paycheck dad. The household was divided, in between breadwinner and in a way housewife. And my mom was never a housewife, but there was a clear line of he earned the paycheck, and my dad usually worked some crazy hours. He started off where he was in graphic design. So his projects may be a week of 3 to midnight, and then, a week of midnight to 7, whatever the project required. And then he would flip to another schedule. So you never really knew when he was going to be home. And when he was home, let's say he worked 3 to midnight, he kind of slept most of the day. So it was pretty much one of those, like, I don't know if people get the joke, but leave your dad the big piece of chicken type of father, right? It was like,
yes.
So,
yes, Chris Rock reference.
Yeah.
I use it all the time. All dad gets is a big piece of chicken, which is why we're doing this episode, because at least this time, fathers on Father's Day are going to get an episode.
Right. So yeah, he was that type of father where he was around. I don't want to make it sound like my father was an absentee dad. He was around, but it really was like. Very like you walk in a room, he's sitting in the living room reading a paper and watching, the news, and you're like, "Hey, Dad, how was work?" Oh, really? Oh, okay. And he's like, "How's school?" "It's doing great." Blah blah. Hey, hold on a second. They're about to do the sports. I want to see the score of the game last night. And then but he was always available. But it was just like you would see him in spurts. So, long story short, my relationship with my dad was really like I knew what he was. He was a provider and he took care of the family, but he wasn't into the emotional stuff. And I don't think that's a unique situation. I think my opinion was that there was a lot of dads out there that way, who made sure that the bills were paid and the lights were on, and then the emotional soft, having to sit down with your kid about certain topics or anything was kind of like mom's job. So it wasn't until much later that we developed like a closer relationship where we can talk about certain things, and he's a lot more open than he was, 30 years ago.
So you have an 80s father. Now, did he have his own chair? It was a dad's chair.
Oh, yeah. So basically our house the living room was dad's room. For the most part. So he didn't have the I don't know what to call it, like the Barker lounger per se, but he had basically the love seat, in our living room. We had the couch, love seat, and then he had this. It was I guess you can call it like the again, these old references. It was like one of those old 80s living rooms where you had the floral print couch, and then there was like the brown chair. Where ours was a brown love seat, and it had the ottoman that went with it. So my dad would his move would be, he would basically slide the ottoman all the way up to the chair, put his feet up, and then just kind of chill out. And he wasn't a beer drinking dad or whatever. He would sit there, watch his TV, and he was a huge guy. Like that's what got me into music. He was huge, not just all into any type of music. And he would typically play the record player and just kind of sit there and chill out and decompress. So, and that was the funny thing is you mentioned that it brings back these memories of I would sit in that chair like and take a nap, and then my dad would come through you hear him come through the back of the house to the garage, and I would like it was just like
oh shit, Dad's home. Let me get the hell out of
dust off my popcorn and my chips out of his chair, and jump over on the couch because it was like that's Dad's chair.
I wonder how much of that is really going on because it was the same thing. It's like that's Dad's chair, and then Dad ran the living room, so whatever Mom and Dad wanted to watch, that's what you watched. And if you didn't like it, then go outside and play.
No.
And I don't know how much of that is really at play anymore. I mean, smartphones aside, right? Because I feel like we raised our kids in a utopian household, and it was a big struggle for me because there aren't those boundaries between like my son and my daughter and my wife and family where I'm so used to that, where it's like, okay, well, my spot, Dad's spot is right next to Mom on the couch, not your spot is next to Mom on the couch. So if I come in the room, get your ass up and fucking move.
Right.
There's like none of that. And if I were to even say anything or when I mention it, my wife would get pissed off at me. It's the same way today still, where like my son, he can come over and we always love it when he comes over, but he can like nestle up to his mother on the sofa. And I'm like looking at him like, I don't want to have to tell you. She'd be like, oh shit, here, Dad, you can sit here. And I don't know how many households are like that for kids that were raised in, we'll say the 2000s now, right?
No.
The turn of the 2000s. I don't know if it's like that anymore, but you're right. For us, children of the 80s, it was so much, that's Dad. And my house was the same way. He would go to work, he'd come home, and sit on his chair. So he had the lounger, and he'd always get the Seagram 7 and put some ice in it and pour a little water in there and kind of lay back, read the paper or watch the shows and fall asleep and wake up. It was just, that was his spot in the living room, was at the corner.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You make a good point about the whole. I thought about it when my kids got to a certain age of, how different, I parented versus my dad. I always felt like that my dad was great at what he did, being a provider, but if we didn't have close bonds, we didn't have that tight bond that you would have, you see in other families, maybe perhaps, and I made it a point that I wanted to have a different relationship with my son. But I also think that it also came at some cost of I opened up this level of, I don't know, just him being comfortable in spaces that we didn't have. Like you said, the mom's on the couch and he's laying in Mom's lap and he's playing with his, whatever. And I come home and I sit down on the couch and he doesn't immediately get up and go, oh yeah, it's I need to move. It's kind of like my mom's here, she's kind of like, well, I don't want to push him out of his spot. Look at him, he's happy. No, like, well, I'm happy. I just got off work.
Right.
That's right. My spot. And it's like, yeah, it's a different dynamic because your kids in when I was raising my kids, they were young, and I'm sure the same for you, had different, the boundaries were so much more different. They weren't clear and understood. And some of that was on us, like I feel like that father, I think I encouraged him to be around more when I asked you the question. I remember there was times where I knew not to be in the room. You know what I mean? It was like, if I came home and Mom and Dad were having a conversation, it was probably my best interest to go right to my room and be like, when they're done, they'll let me know. I don't want to hear the conversation about while the light bill went up $40. And him getting it all out about the light bill. You know what I mean? If that conversation is headed my way, he'll let me know. Or whatever other issues they talked about that basically were not for kids' ears. I knew it. I felt it. I come in and they were already talking and it seemed like they weren't talking about, hey, I love you today. And that was great. It was kind of like, what? And it's like, yeah, this conversation is not meant for a 12-year-old me. I'm just going to go in the room. And I think we've allowed a certain, level of comfort with our kids where they feel like that they're comfortable in that space. And we didn't have that.
Yeah. I do not remember my parents. And this is one thing, I do not remember them ever having an argument. And being a parent, having a spouse, that they are there. They have to happen. It is not normal for them not to happen. Some sort of disagreement. I do not remember that ever happening. So maybe it happened and I just put it out of mind or whatnot.
No,
So
I
let's
think you're
shift. So
right. I think it happened. I think that it's just that they did a good job of not letting it happen in front of you.
Yeah. So let's because I remember you. I mean, because Kiki's always been around. So that's your 26-year-old people listening.
Yes.
And she's always been like, you've always treated her, you're like your own daughter. That's from what I recall. What's it like being to you? Like, how was that for you? Like, what were the true dynamics? Because me as your coworker and then as your roommate for a little bit, I only saw one way, but being in that situation now, with both of my kids, and I always call them, I never really refer them to my stepkids unless I'm telling a story, but they are, and they never call me stepdad unless they're introducing me to somebody. They just call me dad, and they've never called me Jay. And I don't remember. Did she always call you James?
Well, I mean, I was I was going to say unique, but I don't think it is. So to answer your question, no, it's been really, it's kind of like she flip flops. So when, Tori and I got together when Nicole was 2. And it wasn't like her father.
Nicole, for the people listening.
Yeah, Nicole. Sorry, Kiki. I try to, now that she's old.
You call her Nicole.
I know, but I try to. It's so much habit of me calling Nicole now because she's older. She doesn't like Kiki anymore. And so I've been working on that for a long time. But yeah,
I mean, she liked it when she was 4.
She liked it when she was 4. Now she's
okay.
Yeah, and so but yeah, Nicole / Kiki. She was 2 when we got together, and Toya did something that I would assume most single mothers do. They have a conversation with the guy they're dating when it gets to a certain point. She goes, listen, it's a package deal. If you're not in on the package, just let me know. And, I was in an age where I was like, no, I mean, I don't have a problem. I mean, you have a child. It's, like you said, it's part of the deal. I can't say I take you and not the. So yeah, she's been, I've been in her life since she was 2, and she says dad, and she says, she calls me by my middle name, as most people do in the household because of my mom, and it flip flops, and then when Jordan came around, it was more dad than name because she wanted him to get used to him to hear her say dad instead of who's this, James guy. It's like that's dad. So over time, it's more dad but early on, yeah, it was kind of because they're 6 years apart. It was really like she had a dad, and I don't know if she felt comfortable saying dad and dad.
Right.
And we never really had the conversation, but that was just my assumption that she was like, I have a dad, and and Vincent is still around. He's around, and he was around then. So it was always like, do I say dad and dad, or I say dad 1, dad 2? And she was just like, I don't want to make it complicated.
So with her being 26 now and then Jordan being 20, have you started to kind of see those changes? I talked about this last year at the Father's Day episode, but maybe they don't come out and say, gosh, you sure did put up with a lot of shit. Like I'm able to do that. But you can kind of tell like the stuff you kept hammering in their heads and they're finally just doing it. And you kind of sit back and you're looking at them like, yeah, you were listening, or, now and it kind of feels I don't know if gratifying is. It feels a little fulfilling to be like, okay, all that struggle is working out.
I mean, I feel like you're right. I struggle with using the word, it's. There are moments when you have conversations with your child, and there are adult conversations, and some of them happen organically, and some of them happen because you start talking to them as if they're adults. But some of them happen like I use Jordan for example. Our first adult conversation happened completely organic. Organically. It was like he had a girlfriend and things weren't going great, and he had one of those moments where he was making a decision: do I keep going with this, or do I just say, hey, I've had my fill, let me go ahead and call it a night, and we were just eating, and he says, hey, girlfriend, says this and this and that, and I kind of want to tell her that I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm like, well, I mean, I gave him my, my piece about, you want to do it in the right way. You want to make sure that you express how you feel, and if that can't change, or if things can't change, then if you feel that way, then yes, it's time to call it. And don't drag it out. Don't, just say, it's not working. And he listened, and that's, to me, that's the moment, sometimes it's not the conversation, but the moment when they actually, they listen and then they use the advice. Because I know a lot of kids, they've been listening and they pretend like that they're not listening or you don't know what you're talking about, but they still use the advice. They just don't tell you. It was like he listened, took the advice, had the conversation with her, and then circled back and told me, yeah, you were right. And that was one of those moments I was like, wow, he really, I knew he used the information I gave him and he was actually actively listening. So yeah, it's a moment where you go, wow, and I didn't expect it from him. Nicole slash Kiki has always had those moments. Because she was more mature at that age. But for him to do it, it was like, okay, our relationship is actually turning this corner of I hope we have other conversations like this, and I hope that this wasn't a one-off, where he was like, yeah, dad was right about that, but that dude has no clue about movies, or he has no clue about, working in the real world, and so far we've had a couple other conversations, but yeah, it is, I guess gratifying when your kids actually come to you in a way where they trust your advice versus just going through the motion of he's gonna say this, I'm just gonna nod my head, and then later I'm probably gonna do what the hell I want because F him. He's 108 years old. What the fuck does he know? So
right. If you're old, you don't know shit. What's strange is like my kids don't come to me and talk to me about hardly anything. They may ask me stuff almost to kind of play on what you had just said, like direction and value your opinion, but it's never those conversations. And it's interesting. And I don't know, that they always go to, my wife about everything. So she's always giving me updates on the kids. And it's just one of those weird things. It's like, I don't know if I screwed up somewhere in the past or what, but I mean, with the way my daughter is, it's not that big of a deal, but it would have been nice to have an opportunity to kind of maybe weigh in on some of the things that she puts herself through. I wouldn't say that she's going through, but, some of the situations she puts herself through at times. But it's one of those deals with her where she can look right at you and you're talking to her and you think that she's getting it and she does not give a flying fuck and she will do whatever it is she wants to do. And that's a challenge for myself and my wife as a parent.
No.
You just never know. But with my son, he's very pensive. He can be extremely thoughtful. He's very stubborn, but he's listening.
Right.
And he remembers to the point where he will call you out if you say something different, like 3 years from now. It's like, oh, didn't you say? It's like, oh, well, I mean, so much has changed then. But I still don't really have those conversations. It's like, hey, Dad, I'm thinking about getting these 3 cars. What do you think? Or, hey, Dad, can I borrow this scan tool? Or, my car's making this noise. Or what alcohol should I buy? But it's never like, I'm thinking about making this career change, or I'm not happy in my job. I just don't get those.
No.
And it used to bother me, but it doesn't bother me anymore because, it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah, I think also parenting changes. Like, I think you shift your focus on, I think early on, most parents feel like, am I doing this right? You constantly asking yourself, am I doing this right? And the lesson I learned with my 2 kids, because Jordan is more like your daughter. He's very, I'm gonna use a word that that my Southern it's just stubborn is not a strong enough word to describe my child. It's like,
right. Okay. All right. Yeah.
And it's like you and I got to
inflexible.
Thank you. That is very good. Yes, that and
mentally rigid.
Yeah. No. And it got to a point to where, and Toya would have the same problem with him. At first, I thought it was me. And I said, well, maybe she can approach him differently. And it came out, no, neither approach worked. And what I came to realize is that I needed to parent him differently than we parented Nicole. I think a lot of parents think that this book works for all children of all shapes, sizes, and whatever. And it's like, it doesn't. It's like Nicole was very passive. When you said blah, 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 like, I need you to do this, she would nod her head and go, you're right, I do this. And then she would get to that conclusion at some point, or maybe she got it right away, versus he was more, it was more combative in a way. It was like, prove it. like I said, hey, dude, this job sounds great on paper, but I'm worried about the fact that this hourly wage is just temporary, or they're going to tell you they're going to guarantee you 40 hours, but it looks like this is an open schedule where you may only get 28 hours this week. What are you going to do about the income? He's like, no, that's not what they said. I said, that may not be what they told you during the interview process, but I'm reading like he had an offer letter. And I'm like, I'm reading the offer letter. It basically says that they do billable hours. So it's like if they said job is going to take 6 hours and it ends up taking 3, you're getting paid for 3.
Right.
He was like, but they told us that almost all the jobs. I said, almost all is such loose language, and he's looking at me like, you don't know. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to get into this to where it becomes just a stalemate. So I've given you my piece. This is what I think is going to happen. And he was like, well, you don't know that. And I'm like, you're right. I don't know. And then I was like, I'm just letting you know this could happen. And then he walks away and he uses that information or not. And then later, if it turns out that I was correct or whatever, I don't do the whole I told you so moment. He tells me what happened and I'm just nodding at him. I'm like, hopefully that light's going to pop on his head that what he's bitching about today, because his check is short, that he recalls what I said to him when he took this job. Sometimes I think it's like on the verge of like flipping, but I don't stand there and wait for it to happen anymore. I don't need that moment of I was right. I just need him to understand that some things I know because I've been there. And that's the hardest thing to explain to a kid. It's like,
it is.
I'm not telling you this because I'm trying to, his response should always be like, man, you're just trying to let the air out of my balloon. I love it. He has a line that he goes, Dad, I just wish you let me fly. Right. And every time he says that, my immediate response is, I don't care about where you're flying. I just want you to look out for buildings. I don't know, the electrical pole, right, or whatever, or other planes in the area. I'm not trying to stop you from flying. I just want to make sure that you fly and you don't crash unless you choose to crash. That's the hardest conversation to have with your kids sometimes, because to them it's like, why are you trying to let the air out of the balloon? I'm like, I'm not. I'm just telling you that I've been there.
Let me ask you this, selfishly. Are there times you want them to crash, just not kill themselves?
Yeah, I think that, my thing used to be, my grandmother used to have 2 sayings. One was hard head make a soft behind. And the other one is, she was like, I'm just trying to stop you from bumping your head on that wall. And I came to a point with him particularly where I was like, no, I think sometimes he needs to bump his head on that wall. And sometimes that's part of parenting also, is to know they're going to crash. But I don't want to be the guy that puts up the roadblock. I'm like, no, if he goes down that road, I know where it's going to lead, but I don't want him to use me as, well, you put that roadblock up, we'll never know. I'm like, no, I want him to go that direction, realize it's the wrong direction, and hopefully he can circle back or choose another lane. But I can't just be the guy who sticks out the stop here sign and like, hey, dude, you can't do that.
Yeah, it's one of those things too. And then like with my son, he seems to always, like if he's getting ready to crash, he'll somehow hit something and it'll bounce right back up. And you're like, damn it, man, I really need you to learn that lesson, man. But he just keeps going, man. It's just a crazy thing. I don't know about your favorite memory. What is there a specific memory that stands out with your father?
One of the strongest memories I have is, little me. And when I say little me, I mean that the 6 to, let's call it 9 age me. My dad has always been into, I said it earlier, he's always been into music. He had this record collection when I was a kid, which went from, I don't know, let's say Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, to as far as some awful 80s stuff, like one-hit wonder stuff. Like, and I'm going to throw stuff out there that if anybody knows this song, kudos to you. But, I mentioned it because I started off with Led Zeppelin, and then Robert Plant in the 80s made this horrible, like, I'm in the mood for a melody. It was just one of the most generic 80s songs from a guy who to me used to be a rock god. It was kind of like that realization that everyone has to do what they need to do to, earn a paycheck, earn a living. And then he had some stuff in between there. But his record collection to me was like gold. I would spend hours with him listening to some of his stuff. I mean, he turned me on to some amazing music that I think changed my life, where I learned to appreciate, like I said, the Stones, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Average White Band. I mean, all these things that to me was like music that, quite frankly, where we lived was not of pop, it was not popular music. You know, I mean, we lived in Memphis in some of the hardest parts of Dallas, so where speaking in the nicest way, that wasn't the music of my neighborhood. You know, it was more R&B, some Motown and stuff like that. And I just appreciate the fact that he opened my eyes to us having just this time. That was his. That's it worked for us both. That was his way of decompressing, and that was my way of spending time with my dad. Because if you came home and put on an album, that's what 48 minutes of him sitting in one spot, right? And the trick of it is that it worked for the both of us. He decompressed, I spent time with him, and I was also the guy who was his DJ. Hey, Brandon, get up and go ahead and flip it over for me. So it was mutually beneficial, and that was the best times we had together when I was younger, was playing as DJ. And we'll sit there and have conversations about music that would lead to us having real conversations that I couldn't have with him just by saying, hey dad, can I talk to you a minute? Oh man, I'm on my way to this, da, 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 maybe later, or ask your mom. It was basically a segue into, yeah, her voice is beautiful. I was like, yeah, this girl I go to school with, man, she looks like her. I think she's really cute. And I'm thinking about asking her out. Really? Well, it just, that was our way of communicating.
You know, you said something that I think we could spend another 30 minutes talking about, but we don't have the time. And that's opening your eyes to other music. And I think that's one of the things we appreciated about each other as friends is because you're right. It's not the music that's always playing in certain neighborhoods or certain peer groups. And it's not being ashamed to be like, hey, I like this song. Hey, I like Pink Floyd. I like Led Zeppelin. People aren't looking at you crazy.
Right.
And, that's a whole other conversation that we can definitely have down the road, because I think it's kind of a shame in some, subsets of cultures where it's like you feel like you have to be a certain way in order to fit in. And, we focus too much about, well, you have to look a certain way. But that's not even it, man. It's not just how you look or your sexual orientation, to use a more modern thing that's going on, but just the clothes you wear, the music you're into,
No.
the way you speak, those are all kind of systemic things within a culture that can hold a culture back. So how about with Jordan, and Nicole, like what's a favorite memory you have of them growing up before we jump into some MCU stuff, because we're both kind of nerdy like that. And I want to talk about Falcon and the Winter Soldier before we get you out of here. So
okay.
Hit me up with something quick on Jordan. Hit me up with something quick for Nicole, and then we'll shift gears.
Really easy. I mean, my oldest child was a grown woman when she was 2. I mean, my all-time favorite memory is the fact that I had the easiest job in the household when she was a child. She would behave like an adult. She'll get up, fix her own bowl of cereal, get in front of the TV, watch cartoons, and then we would sit there and watch TV together. And it was like, if this is parenting, because my oldest made it so easy, this is a piece of cake. And I just,
shit, this is easy. What are you
what are people bitching about?
Shit, what are they doing wrong?
Yeah, that's all. I was like, what the fuck are they doing? And it was like, it was this joy of the most easiest experience with my daughter was sitting down and watching Saturday morning cartoons with her eating a bowl of like Fruity Pebbles. Conversely, Jordan was always my child of, he was a daredevil. And my fondest memory of him at 6 building this Tony Hawk like ramp in my backyard. And I'm like, as a parent, like, you could kill yourself. But as a parent also, it's like I wanted him to find his spot, his like. So I basically said, okay, we're gonna do this, but let's do the helmet. Let's do the whatever safety gear you need to do this, right? So of course I'm that parent who's like, yeah, son, just jump this ramp. So he builds a ramp, does everything he wants to do, right? Does a test run, didn't put his helmet on, right? So he does a little thing, comes off, lands in the most awful spot. Our yard had a tree that had some really hot, like the roots were maybe like a quarter of an inch above ground. So of course he hits that one sweet spot between flat dirt and the root, and he has this knot that I kid you not, it was probably the size of like, I don't know, let's call it an orange in my eyes because he's young. I'm like, holy crap. I killed my kid. We're in the backyard. This thing is pulsating like some kind of like, I don't know. Like I thought he was going to grow another head. And then, but in the meantime, his mom and Nicole are in the house. So now I've had this uncomfortable moment of like, I killed our kid. Oh my God. And so I go in and I explain the situation and Tori's like, what happened? Look at his head. I'm like, I know. It's scary. It's crazy. And so the whole time, I think that was the first time my son had ever seen me freak out. Right. So he's crying. I'm looking crazy. We're all worried. I call the whatever, ask a nurse, 1-800 ask a nurse or whatever. And the nurse is like, so let me hear what happened. Oh yeah, good news is that the swelling went out instead of in. That's a whole nother problem. She goes, yeah, ice it, watch it for a couple of days, stay with him that night, and if he doesn't have a concussion, everything else, he should be fine. So that moment was that reality of I had finally I got a parent moment that I didn't have with Nicole. And to this day, I mean, we joke about it because I was like, your kid goes, yeah, man, at least dad and Nicole goes, at least dad let you go outside and skateboard till you cracked your head wide open. And I'm like, that's not the right way to phrase that. Yes,
That's funny.
I was.
It's like, damn, wait, he don't want me around, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Huh.
Oh, the idea of like, and I don't know if you run into this older kid and younger kid, where the older kid typically parents are a little bit more tighter on the reins, and then the younger kid they kind of figured out that you don't have to sit there and say you only eat organic oatmeal. It's like, sure, eat the dirt. I don't care. So yeah, that was really the whole that moment of like, man, I actually did something with my kid that it's like, oh my gosh. And then you talk to other parents and like, oh, dude, that's fine. My kid the other day, man, he needed 47 stitches because he decided that he was going to ride the rail down the stairs at home. Something stupid. I'm like, oh, this happens a lot. It's like, yeah, this happens all the time. You're a perfect dad. It was that moment of like, I questioned, was I being the best dad I could be? And I'm talking to other dads who like have kids his age. Like I took them to Dads with Donuts. They're like, that's nothing. My kid had 47 stitches, and my wife basically had me sleep on the couch for a week. So.
Well, you're doing good. I'm confident of it because everyone is still in your life and no one has cast you aside. So
No.
let's switch gears, man.
All right.
We're big kind of nerds. I think that's another reason why we're such good friends. And the MCU. So, I mean, Loki's going on right now. I have not seen the episode. Recording this would be the second episode. So I've not seen that yet. By the time this comes out, I will have. But Falcon and the Winter Soldier just wrapped up about a month ago. And, what were your thoughts on that? And you can't be that person who's like, well, it's different in the comic books because the MCU has done whatever they want over the last 24, 25 movies and a few shows. And for the most part, people are okay with it.
No, I mean, I'm not going to be that purist who trashes movies because they don't follow the comic.
That book was better.
Oh my gosh. It's like I struggle because you and I, you're right. We have so many things in our lives that we both are pretty much nerdy about, music, cars to a certain extent. You're a far bigger nerd than I am about cars. But this other topic of comics versus the MCU or just comics in general. First, I enjoyed it. I'm not going to be that guy that goes, wow, like there's people here who want to Monday quarterback every single decision that Marvel does in regards to the MCU. And I'm like, if they made every movie like the comic, why would you see the movie?
Right.
So I expect them to embellish. I expect them to do changes. Like like I read this comic when I was, oh my gosh, I was in my 20s. That is loosely based on the idea of the U.S. agent and all that comes with that, the ending of one Captain America and someone else picking up the mantle. And I remember as a kid, what was so intriguing is that you never thought there'd be a U.S. agent or someone else being Captain America. You're too young to realize that, even heroes die.
Mm-hmm.
And as an adult, I'm like, you don't get that pop unless you do something and retell this story in a way that I wasn't expecting that. I thought what Marvel has done so well is in these series in particular. I mean, I don't know if you saw WandaVision.
I did.
Okay. They've done something that DC probably would never be able to do because they cater to a different audience. Is these series are, number one, great fillers between, phase 3, 4, whatever, however you want to, say it. And also they do a really good job of leaving things out there that they can't cover in a 2-hour movie, and what I thought was great about, the Winter Soldier series is that there were some things that didn't need to be said when we saw the movie. Like Sam, they did a really good job of saying, oh, by the way, here's a little backstory on Sam and here's what's been happening, and they bring up some very important plot details that the average moviegoer doesn't want to see in a movie, and I appreciate them for that because the series is an option. If I don't care what Sam Family was doing or how he got by, I love the idea of that someone finally talked about the fact that being a superhero does not pay well. I mean,
Yeah, that was awesome.
it's like that needed to be said. Not everyone is Bruce Wayne, and you see that he struggled. His family struggled because he was out saving the world and he wasn't earning a living.
I mean, saving the world could not get you a loan. You know what I mean?
Right. That the average guy who's doing this because he solely is doing this for the sake of humanity does not pay well. And I love the fact that, and I know I'm going off topic, but
no, you're not going off topic at all.
But there's other superheroes that have been talking about this for years. Spider-Man is the most prime example. Peter Parker struggles his whole adult life, relationship-wise, professionally, because at the end of the day, you can't do both. You can't be a millionaire unless you're Bruce Wayne, or a billionaire, and save someone's life on a Wednesday afternoon. It's like I can't sit here right now and talk. You go, oh crap! The black tornado phone went off behind me. I gotta go and go out and stop a train. It's like that's.
Is that who you would be? Would you be the Black Tornado if you were a superhero?
Every week I come up with a different name. And this week it's the Black Tornado because I was making a joke with my son about the fact that the Black Lightning on CW. It's like it's hard for me to watch that show because it's so comical. But I love the cheesiness of superhero names, and I can go down a whole another rabbit hole with that. But back to the question is like that series did a really good job of filling in some gaps and bringing everyone up to speed. I love the fact that they acknowledged some things that should have been talked about at some point in some of these movies, and that the villain wasn't a some people was like all poo-poo about the villain, and I'm like, that's great.
Right.
You took a character who was going to waste in the movies, and I don't know if this was by design. I mean, the people over there at Marvel Studios are far more intelligent than I am when it comes to what their designs are and how they want to, lay out the phases of the Marvel Universe. But maybe this was by design. Maybe they kind of left her in your eye just enough for you to see in the background. And then the whole time you're like, oh, but they're going to use her later. It was like, I thought it was brilliant. I thought that they did a really good job of telling us the relationships in particular in this series are great.
So you're referring to Sharon Carter being the power broker?
Yeah, Sharon Carter being the power broker. The fact that Bucky has to go back and face the reality of what he's done, and you see him.
And he has PTSD.
Yes, he has PTSD. He's basically, living the life of an actual soldier who's been through those type of things. Of you just don't walk.
They should have died 100 years ago.
Yes, and the fact that he's living with it longer than most people live on the planet. I thought they did a really good job of humanizing two characters that you just kind of get lost in the weeds because of, who they were in the movies. So
I really like them addressing the other super soldier. I forgot his name, but the old black man.
Oh, that was wonderful.
And that whole thing, I think, because, I mean, let's admit it. It's just like Black Panther was so successful because you have a 99% African-American cast. You have the music, and you have kind of a loose adaptation of things that happened in the Black culture on screen. And I know there were a lot of people who saw that movie as the only MCU movie they've ever seen because of that.
True.
Right?
No. I mean, that's a fact.
Yeah, and then I think that in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they tackled some of those things too. I mean, they basically tackled you're gonna sell out. They don't care about you because you're black, and it's from one black man to another, and that is a microcosm of a lot of the stuff that kind of goes on in the culture. Either you can go out there and save the world, or you can stay here with us, but they ain't never going to see you for anything other than what you are. And then, Sam Wilson being like, well, you know what? I'm just going to have to live with that decision and get over myself because someone needs to go out there and save the world, and it's going to be me, and I think, and even with the guy's, his grandson, who I guess is supposed to be the leader of the Young Avengers at some point as well, so he was in there.
Yeah, I thought that particular part of it touched me in the way of when you meet him, and a lot of people didn't know that story. That, and I used to joke, I like the reason why I like the fact that they deviated from the source material is that, number one, there's a story there between a man who his version of what happened is totally different than what happened with Rogers. It wasn't all
Right.
gumdrops in Candyland. It was like, first of all, I didn't want it. Second of all,
Right.
I
They tortured me and put this shit in me, and
yes,
then they locked me
yeah,
away.
it wasn't an option. And then second of all, the fact that they just basically said, okay, experience number 127, put it in a cage and work out the best. Why wouldn't he have some anger, deep seated anger that is directly tied into race? That some people forget that as much as some people want to overcome what they've been through, the reality of it is that some people just don't. And for good reason. I mean, to him, he had a very good reason for feeling the way he felt and how he expressed that to Sam. It was
Yeah, and
because
just for the record, that's Isaiah Bradley. I had to look it up because I couldn't remember his name.
and
The old black man.
yeah, the old, and a lot of people say the old angry black man. I'm like, well, you will be angry too. So let us not forget that he has a reason to be angry. But and this goes back to, again, I think that's the brilliance of Marvel, that no one wanted to see that in the Marvel movie. That movie is made for a certain story and theme. And you couldn't touch on that in the middle of Civil War, for example, or the actual Captain America movie. It was like that movie was solely made around nostalgia and the introducing you to a character that some people didn't know. And putting that little tidbit in there would have taken away from some of the scenes that people really loved, about the fact that it's like, Captain America's awesome. Oh, tell this guy that, because he didn't, first of all, it happened to him and it wasn't by choice. And he didn't think it was awesome, and he didn't get the love and affection that you get as Cap. And I think that you need something like this series to tell some of these stories and to kind of humanize the people in between the explosions and all the things that we love about a popcorn movie in the theater.
Yeah, and another thing that, and kind of backtrack a little bit on stuff that Marvel does well, is if you go back and you look at Civil War. So, after the opening scenes of Civil War, here they are sitting in the room with Secretary Ross, and they're being asked to answer for all the collateral damage, and you never really hear that brought up. I mean, it's an adaptation from the comic, sure, but in the big screen, in most movies, it's not like, okay, you saved the city and blew up the entire city and everybody survived. No, it's these people died while you were too busy trying to save the world. And while we thank you for saving the world, there's thousands of people out there who are angry, who have lost family members, and they want you guys held in check. And I think even Vision in that movie had said something like, when you get super soldiers, or superheroes, it breeds the need for anti-heroes, or conflict, right? Because challenge, it brings on challenge, and challenge brings on chaos, and that's kind of how they kind of land in their reality of consequence. So yeah, those are some of the things that they tackle, and I think it's excellent. I think the show is really good too.
Yeah, I think it was a great show, and I think you're right. I think it tackles some of that stuff. I again, it's a little off topic, but I have this running nerd conversation with a friend of mine who first introduced me to what he refers to as the Death Star paradox, where it's like, great job, you destroyed evil, but what about the custodian who was just working because he didn't have a choice? He got blown up too.
Yeah.
It's just like, it was just a Wednesday for him, and it's like, that's true. It's like, for every moment you look at it and go, the idea of a superhero and heroism, there's also a flip side of the fact that it does breed some chaos. It does breed someone who goes, well, what if what if I don't want Superman to do this? What if that's something he shouldn't be doing? And it raises that question of, for every action there's a positive and opposite. There's a reaction, and we don't know what that is, but it does breed someone who's going to come out of that. So,
well, case in point, Zemo, right?
Yes, perfect case in point.
Zemo, Sokovian Special Forces, and he's painted as being the main villain in Civil War, and then also in this, to an extent, he's kind of an extended villain. But if you really think about it, he lost his family while the Avengers were fighting away the baddies, Ultron, and the only thing he wants to do is destroy the Avengers, and wants to take away, he wants everyone to be equal. Super soldiers are the worst thing to happen. And even he said not everybody can be Captain America, because he was the rare exception to this whole thing. Everybody else is corrupted by their strength.
No, I mean, I think that is that is a perfect example of that, where you have a guy who was living just his life, right? And for all intents and purposes, was trying to do the right thing, take care of his family, and loses everything over something that was 100% out of his control. And those responsible pretty much were like, well, they were just doing what they were doing. Sorry, it's just collateral damage. He's like, I don't accept that. That wasn't collateral damage to me.
Yeah. It's cars, real quick. What do you have? What are you driving? What do you want? What are you excited about?
Right now, I have finally got out of my Dadmobile.
Okay, so what was your Dadmobile? Because I have a few of them.
Well, I mean, there have been many, but the last one was a 2015 Honda Accord that serviced me well. I have no complaints. I love that car. It was awesome, and it did everything it was supposed to do, right? And I think I fell into the bucket of most husbands. It's like the wife wanted a car she really wanted. It was, it was the nice car in the household, right?
So what did you get Toya and sacrifice?
She got an Infiniti, and it was, that was the car she wanted, and I was like,
those damn Infinitis.
I know, right?
Infiniti what?
Q45. Oh, Q50. Sorry, I forgot. I keep going Q45, and I keep.
Oh, the 4-door.
Yeah, the 4-door.
That's a nice car.
No. I mean, like I said, she had a car that I thought was nice enough. Here I am telling her.
It's a long stretch from the Hyundai Accent Rally Edition.
Right. Right. So
just for the listeners, so Toya used to have this. Remember so this was like a mid '90s Hyundai Accent. This tiny thing.
It was basically a 3-cylinder go-kart.
Right. I used to bust on that car every fucking day.
I hated that car.
So mad.
And I don't know if people in the 90s would know this. These kids nowadays have no clue. So the car, I'm not joking. I really think it was listed as a 4-banger, but I really only think it was pushing the 3-cylinder. But you had to do 50.
Or only 3 cylinders worked.
Right. You had to do 50 for the AC to blow coal. Because it just didn't have enough power to even run the AC to a certain extent. So go ahead, man. Yeah. So that's from the bottom. You start at the bottom. And now we're here. So that was that. And so this year I made a conscious effort to say, listen, I'm steadily approaching 50, right? And it's about time I get a car I wanted. So to answer your question, I have a 2020 Mustang. And that was my first walk into the dealership moment. It was like, it wasn't like put your nuts on the table, but I basically went in there like, I really thought I was Jay-Z. I was like, I want that car in that color and with these rims, and I want it now.
And they go, well, follow me. And we got 42 of those exact ones right here.
Right. I walked in like, you're not going to tell me that I can only get this in blue. I want that car in that color. And the guy was like, yeah, sure. Let's go out and see if we have one you can test drive. I mean, just one of those moments where I was like, it didn't take the air out of the balloon, but it was kind of like, oh, okay. So yeah, let's do that.
Right, that's funny. So it's a coupe convertible?
It's a coupe, no convertible.
Hard top, okay.
Yeah, it's a hard top. I didn't go full blown 5.0 with the, blah, 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 because quite frankly, I still have a household to maintain, so I didn't go stupid. But, it was the car I wanted at the price I wanted. And, I tell everybody, 2020 was COVID giveaway year for cars, and, to me. I mean, I basically got one of those deals that I was like, really? Just going to give it to me? It was kind of like, again, another old joke, Eddie Murphy on Saturday Night Live. You're just going to give me the money? Yeah, sure, just take it. And it was like, so this is what you can give me. I looked at the deck sheet, I'm like, this is the price, right? He goes, yeah, with all the stuff you wanted. So, okay. And then no down payment, right? Yeah.
21 is a kickback year, by the way, too.
Oh, yeah.
Because cars are a lot more expensive.
A lot more expensive now.
It's hard to keep them on the lot.
Yep. But yeah, so I took advantage. That was another reason why I decided to go with the car. The Honda was paid off, and I was like, you know what? They're just basically giving these cars away. I might as well go see if I can get a car like that. My buddy here, he got a car, and he was like, yeah, man, they basically gave it away. So, I got on the phone with the guy, and he said, yeah, come down. I was like, I want this. And, like I said, I came in there like I was running the joint. He was like, yeah, we can do all that. And I was like, oh.
That's hilarious. So why a Mustang?
Quite honestly, the plan was for me to pay off the Honda, keep it, and then I was going to go buy a Classic. I think we had this conversation many moons ago. I don't even know if you remember. Like I called you one out of the blue, and I said, "Hey man, how does it work with your insurance with the Classic?" And
Oh, okay.
And you kind of gave me the skinny, and I'm like, "All right, good enough." And I was like, "I'll let and I was like, So anyway, fast forward, I was like, "Yeah, that's my plan. I was going to keep the Honda as a daily driver and go get a Classic, right?" So it came time to me to pull the trigger, and so I was looking at some cars. There's a couple Classic dealers here. that have inventory in other places. Long story short, I couldn't find one in that sweet spot price-wise, and I was looking at a couple of Mustangs. I mean, to answer the question, the easiest way is I've always been a big fan of the Mustang. The longer answer is that there was a certain Mustang that I had a certain crush on, if you use that word, and I had every intent on buying that car, and then something changed. It was like personal life change. We house this and that. Life got in the way, and I talked myself off that ledge. I was like, I was changing jobs, I was making a little bit more scratch, and I thought, yeah, here's the time to do it, and then some things changed. So it was a 71 Mustang, and I did all the dirty work. I talked to the guy. We worked out the shipping and all the good stuff. I had my financing from my credit union ready to go, and then something happened at the house and some other stuff, and I was like, okay, it just wasn't meant to be. And so, and between that and now, I realized that I still very much wanted a Mustang, but I've talked myself out of going classic and just saying, listen, get the car, and with as much as you can afford with the bells and whistles. And then later, if you decided once you pay this car off that you still want to circle back to a classic, have that conversation as 53-year-old James versus 46-year-old James, whatever. And that's how I got there.
Nice, man. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show. We'll definitely catch up and need to have you on here again. Make sure you catch up on all your episodes.
Oh, no, man. I appreciate it. It's always an honor, man. Like I said, I may not listen. I may not be, first time caller, long time listener deal, but I am going to go ahead and start catching up, and I appreciate you having me on. And I do promote you. Let me say that. Anyone asks me,
man,
I tell them that you do have a podcast, and I brag about how awesome it is. And I actually showed someone a picture today of your setup, and they were in awe of it. I was like, you see this setup he has, the soundproofing and all this awesome stuff. And whenever you do have me back on, hopefully we can talk about your comment about the whole Tyrese spinoff of Fast. I don't understand it, but we'll get to that another time.
Are we serious right now? Hey, I may have an opportunity to actually meet him, because they're doing the Fuel Fest thing in California, and they're also going to do it here in December, and they had to put it off because of last year. But he's on the cover. He's one of the main guys. So as long as I keep in good contact, I got some pretty good contacts. My girl Jane is running stuff over there with Honda and Toyota of Claremont, and she's over there right now, actually getting ready to do this thing with Cody Walker and them boys. So, man, would that be cool to have Tyrese?
Man, if you have him on there, man, I'm gonna sneak you a couple questions. Nothing that's like I'm not going to do the TMZ questions because that's just silliness, but I have
the red carpet questions. I hate those.
Yeah, no, I have a question that involves a scene in the movie, and I'll sneak it to you at a later date, but I'm just been intrigued by it. I gotta know. I gotta know.
All right, man, I'll be talking to you.
All right, man. Well, appreciate it, man, once again, and keep doing what you're doing.
One of the things, James, for joining the show. So during that call, you heard him refer to himself as Brandon too. And I remember, because I think Brandon is his first name and maybe James is his middle name, because Toya, his wife of forever, used to always yell Brandon. And I used to look, I'm like, who the fuck is Brandon? But yeah, I mean, we could talk music. We could talk about anything. And that's a thing. That's a thing. And I don't talk to him as much as I should, but I'm kind of that guy. I'm kind of the glue. I reach out to people. People don't reach out to me, which makes me wonder, am I just a bad person? Am I just an annoying person? Do people not like me? And then you always hear that, well, and I never heard this from that crew. You hear in work or you hear in family. Well, you know how Jay is. Well, I don't know what that means. But it doesn't sound like it's a good thing. So it's time for the Q&A segment, sponsored by The Credit Mix. Fix your credit and fix your life. Text HP Credit to 737-4CREDIT. That's 737-427-3348. Schedule your free 15-minute credit consult today. Again, text HP like hard parking. Get it? HP Credit to 737-4CREDIT. That's The Credit Mix with 2 E's. Fix your credit and fix your life. First question comes from Mimi Morgan. What's the hardest part about being a father to a daughter? Now, I found this question kind of challenging because it kind of boxes you in. I would say, in my specific case, daddy issues. And why I say that is because children don't really understand that you've kind of gone through what they've gone through, but there's a difference being a male and a female. Clinically, Psychologically, just males and females process things differently, even if they have the exact same experiences. And like I've said in other podcasts, not so much on this one, I was adopted. I never knew who my birth father was. Almost nobody knows who my birth father was. So although I had a male in my life that I called dad my entire life, it's still one of those sense of abandonment. And my daughter, her birth father, he came in and went, but there's still like that, how come daddy doesn't want me? There's still those daddy issues. And no matter how coddling I try to be, I've always been dad to her. But no matter how coddling I've tried to be, there's still that hole in her heart. And she went through some things in middle school, and she wanted so badly in high school, and she wanted him. She wanted to go spend time with him. And it's like, well, mommy took me away. Why? And she knew, but I don't know, kids go through things. And, she reached out, and, they talked a few times, and he showed up to some of her events, and that was it. I think she was over it and kind of realized that, okay, yeah, dad is dad, which is me. And my birth father is whoever he's going to be. Moving on. So I would say daddy issues is the hardest part about being a father to a daughter. Ugly Bastard asked, what's your best dad joke? And I'll tell you this, I don't know, because dad jokes for me, I am a dad joke. That's my best dad joke. I am a walking dad joke. These are usually things that you just come up with on the spur of the moment. It's not like, what did the doctors say to the whatever, and you give a punchline. It's just, you'll see something and you'll just change one word and it'll be so stupid. I'm staring at a bag right now, DeWalt, the DeWalt tools. The dad joke in me, the dad in me will call it DeWalt Disney. Wes Tankersley, friend of the show, asked, what is your favorite memory with your father? Wes, this was difficult because, and it's weird because I'm going through my memory banks and thinking, God, I don't know. We did so much together, but we didn't do much together. And it's, but it's one of these things where a few months ago, I was thinking, God, I really want to bring this up with my memory of my father. And I really want to wait till the Father's Day episode. And here we are. And you know what it is? It's the little things. And it's the little things that I don't think people, I mean, I don't know. I would assume that people don't get to experience this anymore because everybody has a smartphone. Everybody has an iPad. Everybody has something grabbing their attention, our constant desire to be social media, and only small children care about these things. And that's only sometimes. We have Zeke here and he's going to be 3 soon. And, there's a little bit of that, but still not. So one of my favorite memories is him coming home from work. Every once in a while he'd stop at the beer store and it would be, hey, hey, Dad. And I don't even remember how often this happened, but it was so infrequent it made it special. So note to you parents out there who buy your kids all sorts of shit just to keep them happy and get them shut up. It's okay not to buy your kids shit sometimes because then it becomes expected. And then once it becomes expected, it's not special. So he would ask me, I would do this thing where I would always put his beer in the fridge. And once every while, there would be a G.I. Joe in there. And unpacking that beer and reaching in the bag and pulling out an action figure was the coolest thing ever. And I don't know if it happened 10 times. I don't know if it happened twice. I just know I never forgot. And I guess that would make it my favorite memory, or one of them, that excitement of pulling out the G.I. Joe. Ronald asked, what did your dad teach you to drive, and was there anything funny that happened while driving? I don't think he taught me how to drive. I'm sure we did some things for driver's ed because, I'm from that time where you had to go to driving school. You would go and you'd sign up and you'd sit there, you'd go all week and your parents would drop you off and they'd pick you up, or you rode the bus, or whoever else would drop you off, pick you up. And then that was it. Maybe we did some driving around and getting ready for the driving test that you had to take. But it's not like I don't have that thing where my dad had a Ferrari in the garage and he taught me how to drive a stick in a Ferrari. No, he wasn't even a car guy. In fact, I remember getting into a debate with some kid because one of my favorite shows is Miami Vice. And the argument for the Ferrari Daytona Spider was my father said it was a Jaguar, and it's obviously a Ferrari. So I was team Jaguar. It's like, that's a Jaguar. It's a Ferrari. It's a Jaguar. My dad said it's a Jaguar. It's a Ferrari. Yeah, so my dad doesn't know shit about, he didn't know shit about cars. Last question, Jason asked, what's the biggest life lesson you as a father want to pass on to your child? Or I would say children. I'll never forget. I just came home after getting into a lot of trouble, and I would say forgiveness and patience. And what that means is, my mother got so sick of me getting into trouble and doing stupid shit that, my father, I tried to get some money one time and I really messed up really bad. And so I had no money for a trip. And we went to the bank and he handed me $100. And I go, "What's this for?" And he goes, "So you have some spending money," because I had screwed up majorly, but I had no money. And then, along with that, we had a long conversation. And he said, "Son, sometimes you have to walk in life. You can't just run into everything. There are no real shortcuts. There can be quicker ways to get somewhere, but the more shortcuts you take in life, it's going to come back and bite you in the end, or you're going to fall harder." I've had that conversation with both kids. You got to walk through a few things. You got to slow down. There's no rush. Know what you want to do and try your hardest to do it, but don't take any shortcuts. And sometimes they listen and sometimes they don't. Sometimes it doesn't matter, but at least even if they don't listen, that you had said it. It's like, "Look, I told you if you cross the street without looking, you're going to get hit by a car." I feel better now that I've told you that shit, because guess what? You got 2 broken ass legs because you thought you were the exception to life's rule, and you were just going to walk across the street without looking because you're special. You're not special. You're just like everybody else. So you need to get out there and play the game, or play the game within the game. But there's certain rules in life you just can't bend. And that's kind of my takeaway with the whole, sometimes you got to walk. You can't run through life with everything. And that is the Q&A segment. And so with that being said, I want to thank you guys for joining the show. This is a very special show for me, being a Father's Day episode. Again, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there and all the mothers pulling double duty. If you like what you heard, if this is your first time with the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. Leave a review. You can leave a review on Apple. You can't leave a review on every platform, but I'm telling you, those reviews help a lot. They help a lot. If you listen to the show all the time and you're like, "Oh, I should leave a review, but I just haven't done it yet. I need to get to it." Well, fucking get to it. And then tell a friend. I want to thank Wright Honda out of Scottsdale, Arizona, higher quality detail, boosterbath.com, fourwheelonline.com, tonguetreats.com, Cell Shop Wireless Services, The Credit Mix, and Patreon business supporter Kuya Automotive out of Winter Garden, Florida. If you're listening to this and you have a business and you want to support this show, go to the Patreon, click business supporters. Speaking of Patreon, if you're in a position to help the podcast upgrade, join the Patreon for as little as $3 a month and get access to bonus audio as well as show swag. You can also support on Anchor. The Anchor FM link in the description allows you to support the show as little as 99 cents a month. Can't even buy a trip of coffee. I need to build a webpage. If anybody out there knows anything about WordPress and GoDaddy, hit me up, walk me through it. The rest of it I can handle. I run them on auto page. It's on Squarespace, but Eddie disappeared. He's got a busy life, and that was my tech guy. Again, email the show, hardparkingpodcast@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram at NA2NSX or JTravels. That's JAE_travels. Join the Hard Parking Violations Facebook page. Type in Hard Parking Violations. Type in Hard Parking Podcast. Go to that page and click groups if you can't find it. I can't grow unless you tell the world how good this show is. Let's do this. Let's grow this thing together. I will talk to you guys next week. As a lot of you guys know, my daily driver is a 2007 Infiniti FX35 Sport. It's about time I put some money into it. Can't just drive the NSX around all the time looking nice. Want to get some wheels. For over a decade, 4Wheel Online has been bringing the best truck accessories and truck parts to enhance the appearance and performance of all trucks and SUVs. They're dedicated to providing an extensive range of upgrades that will match any maker model on the road. Their truck products cover everything you need for a custom look and added functionality. I was talking about a wheel and tire package. Head over and use their configuration tool. They carry all the major brands of wheels and tires, so go get outfitted today. Visit them at 4Wheel Online. That's 4Wheel, singular, online. Are you tired of your dog losing its cool in a thunderstorm or fireworks? You might want to look at Tongue Treats. TongueTreats.com. High anxiety relief, pain relief, inflammation relief. It's a direct connection between the tongue and the brain. Doesn't waste time going down to the stomach, where it gets broken down, enters the bloodstream, then to the brain eventually. By then, little Izzy, my dog, has been hiding under the house for like 20 minutes. The Tongue Treat CBD strips provide rapid results for your pet with the right amount of CBD, which is not psychoactive. It's important to test and verify your pet is getting the proper dosage. A single strip should be enough. Have doubts? There's certified analysis from a lab available on the website. Think about it. Efficacy and economy. Tongue Treats.
Shut up!